Chapter 6. What the Ash Remembers. The council chamber was carved from a single living tree. Saoirse had not known this was possible. She stood in the entrance and looked up and understood, with the wordless part of her, that the thornwood had been waking since she arrived, that the tree was not dead, that it had been shaped, centuries ago, by the same living architecture that threaded through the citadel's walls, its interior hollowed and smoothed into a vaulted room without ever severing the tree from its roots. The ceiling was the tree's hardwood. The walls breathed, very faintly, if you pressed your palm to them. She did not press her palm to them. She was aware that 12 Sylvain elders were already seated around the curved council table, watching her enter, and she had decided before she crossed the threshold that she would give them nothing that looked like weakness, wonder, or apology. She walked to the seat Erevan had told her would be hers, between his chair and an empty one at the table's end, and she sat, and she looked back at the council with the same calm, comprehensive attention they were giving her. Thessaly, seated along the wall with the other seconds, caught her eye and gave her the smallest possible nod. "You're doing fine." Saoirse had not realized how much she needed it until she felt it land. The council elder at the head of the table, ancient, white-haired, with eyes the color of old ice, spoke. The archivist, seated apart from the council proper, translated in a low murmur at Saoirse's shoulder. "The human is acknowledged. Her presence is noted as provisional and under review." "Understood," Saoirse said. "I am grateful for the council's time." The elder looked at her. Then, in human tongue, with an accent that compressed every vowel, "You speak plainly for a political hostage." "I find plainness more efficient than performance," she said. "I imagine the council does as well." A long pause around the table. Then, from somewhere to her left, a sound that might, in a different register, have been a suppressed laugh. She did not look to find its source. Erevan, to her right, said nothing. But she felt, very briefly, the side of his knee press against hers beneath the table. A fraction of a second. Gone before she could be certain it had happened. She was certain it had happened. She kept her face composed and her chin level and her heart doing something entirely unprofessional in her chest. The session ran 2 hours. The council reviewed. The intruder, Marin, cleared as a non-threat and granted provisional guest status at Erevan's recommendation. The archive breach, Volume 1, missing from its designated shelf, location currently Saoirse's study. The border security implications of both. What the council did not review, because Erevan had not yet disclosed it, Vythan. The translation. The full content of the original treaty. Saoirse understood why. You did not bring a fire to a room full of old paper before you had contained the source. But the empty chair at the table's end bothered her. She looked at it twice before she understood what it meant. It was set with a nameplate. Old silver, tarnished to near black with age. She could not read Sylvain script. But she leaned almost imperceptibly toward the archivist and breathed, "The empty chair." The archivist's pale eyes moved to it. Their voice dropped further. "It is the scholar's seat. It has been empty for 80 years. It is kept set by tradition. By tradition. For a man they believed was gone. Who was not gone. Who was somewhere in this citadel right now, watching, she had no doubt, every move being made in his name." She looked at Erevan. He was listening to the council elder speak, his expression its usual controlled attention. But his eyes moved to her, just for a second, just to check, and she tilted her head almost imperceptibly toward the empty chair. His gaze moved to it, back to her. Something flickered. He had not noticed. He noticed now. The session ended with procedural resolutions she barely tracked. She was thinking about the empty chair and the nameplate and the fact that Vythan had arranged to be present in this room, his chair kept, his memory maintained. For 80 years of council sessions he had been watching from somewhere in the dark. Patient, asterisk her mother had written. Very old, and very patient. The council rose. Saoirse stood with them, and that was when it happened. She had no warning, no build. One moment she was standing beside her chair in the council chamber of a living tree, and the next moment the resonance in her chest, which had been a hum, a presence, a low background frequency since she crossed the border, detonated. There was no other word for it. It detonated. It came up through the floor, through the tree's roots beneath the stone, as though the citadel itself had been waiting for this specific person to stand in this specific room and simply recognized her. Called to her, the way a bell calls to a matching pitch and they ring each other across a room without anyone touching either of them. The amber light in her eyes, the one she had suppressed since childhood, pressed down and concealed so thoroughly it had become reflex, came through. She felt it happen. She could not stop it. It was like trying to hold a door shut against the ocean. The council chamber went silent. She stood in a room of 12 Sylvain elders with light coming from her eyes, not dramatic, not blinding, a warm gold that she was distantly aware made the room look like it had caught the last light of a long day, and every person in the room was looking at her, and she could not make it stop. Don't. She told herself. Control it. You have always controlled it. But the tree had recognized her. The Covenant's roots ran under this room. And whatever lived in her blood was not interested in being controlled anymore. She felt a hand at her elbow. Erevan, firm and sure, not gripping, not restraining, just present. The warmth of his hand through her sleeve was like a fixed point in the disorientation, something solid to orient to. She looked at him. His eyes were the darkest she had ever seen them, nearly gray, nearly still, the color of deep water before a storm. He was not alarmed. He was focused entirely on her with the particular quality of attention that was not the general's attention but the man's, and he said, very quietly, just for her. Breathe. She breathed. Again. She breathed again. The light faded, not instantly, gradually, the way light fades at actual dusk, giving her time to pull it back into herself, layer by layer, until it was the low hum it had been before. Until she was standing in the council chamber with 12 elders and Thessaly and the archivist all very still around her and Erevan's hand at her elbow and nothing in her eyes but her own amber irises looking back at the room. The silence stretched. Then the head elder said, in human tongue, with a different quality to their voice than before, the third blood. Not a question. Yes, Saoirse said. Her voice was steady. She was extremely proud of this. I apologize for the disruption. There is no disruption to apologize for, the elder said. Slowly, with something in their face that was shifting, not from hostility to warmth, exactly, but from old certainty to new assessment. We have not seen the third light in this chamber since the original signing. Then we have that in common, Saoirse said. I haven't seen it either, until approximately 30 seconds ago. Someone around the table exhaled. Someone else made a sound that was definitely a laugh this time, quickly suppressed. Erevan's hand was still at her elbow. She was aware of it with every nerve in that specific 3 inches of her arm. She did not look at him because if she looked at him right now she would not be able to maintain any of the composure she had so carefully reconstructed. The council will reconvene, the head elder said, rising. Tomorrow. With full disclosure. Their pale eyes found Erevan. All full disclosure, General. It was not a request. Erevan inclined his head. Yes. They walked out of the council chamber into the corridor, and Saoirse waited until the other council members had filtered away before she stopped walking and put her back against the wall and let herself breathe properly for the first time in 20 minutes. Erevan stopped with her. Thessaly materialized at a respectful distance, took one look at both of them, and found somewhere else to be with the practiced discretion of someone who had been doing this for 60 years. Well, Saoirse said, to the ceiling. Well, Erevan said. A beat. That has never happened before, she said. I know. I have been suppressing that since I was 6 years old. She pressed the heels of her hands briefly against her eyes. I have been excellent at suppressing it. The Covenant roots run directly below the council chamber. His voice was careful, measured, but underneath it was something warmer than measurement. You've been in the Thornwood for 2 days. The blood was always going to respond to proximity eventually. The chamber simply accelerated it. She lowered her hands, looked at him. He was closer than she'd registered. The corridor was narrow, the wall at her back, and he had stopped only a foot away when she did, which meant they were standing now in the same quality of closeness as the corridor outside her quarters on the first morning, the same charged compression of space. Except that now he had seen her eyes glow gold in a room full of his elders, and he was looking at her like she was something he did not have a category for and was not certain he wanted one, like whatever category she occupied was fine precisely as it was, unprecedented and his to name. "You said breathe," she said. It seemed like the correct thing to say. It was. She held his gaze. "How did you know that would work?" "I didn't," he said. "I knew you would listen. You listened to me in a way that—" He stopped. Something moved across his face, unhurried and visible and very much not the general. "You have extremely good instincts about which battles to fight and which to let pass through you." I was trusting that. She was quiet for a moment. "Erevan," she said, softly. "Don't," he said, the same word as last night, the same tone, but different now. She could hear the difference. Last night it had been a boundary held by certainty. Tonight it was a boundary held by the thinnest, most deliberate restraint. The council session is barely over. Vythan is still unconfronted. "You still don't have—" "I know," she said. "I know. I'm not asking for anything." She looked up at him, and she meant this, meant it completely. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For the archive last night. For this morning. For—" she paused, searching for the word and finding only the true one. "For treating my secrets like they were mine." Something happened to his face. It didn't shutter or control, it simply opened, briefly, like a window thrown wide on a warm day, and what was on the other side of it was not the general and not the scholar. And not the man who had been making himself into something lost couldn't touch. It was just him, 190 years old and in a narrow corridor with a woman whose eyes held the light of a covenant that predated both of them, and looking at her with something so unguarded she almost looked away. He didn't let it stay, but he let it be there long enough for her to see it. "Then, go eat something," he said, roughly. "You haven't eaten since yesterday." She smiled. She couldn't help it. It arrived before she could decide whether to allow it, small and real and warm, the kind of smile she didn't produce for courts or strategy. "Yes, General. Don't call me that. You call me by my name. You told me to. Then consider this me telling you," she said, and pushed off the wall and walked toward the dining hall, and did not look back. She didn't need to. She could feel him watching. She was becoming very fluent in that particular warmth between her shoulder blades, the specific quality of his attention, the weight of it, nothing like being looked past, nothing like being assessed for use. Like being seen, simply, completely seen. She had spent 24 years learning to survive the absence of that. She had not expected to find it here, in a forest that hummed with old magic. In the eyes of a man who had been making himself cold for a century and was losing that project, one narrow corridor at a time. She smiled again, alone in the hallway, and no one saw it, and she kept it entirely for herself. Vythan was in the lower archive. Erevan found him an hour later, standing at the shelf where Volume 1 had been, running one finger along the gap it had left with the expression of a man revisiting a decision. He was old, visibly old, which was rare among the Sylvain, who wore their years inside rather than outside. His hair was fully white, not silver. His face held the deep lines of genuine age. His eyes, when he turned, were pale and calm and carrying something that was not quite guilt and not quite innocence and lived in the complicated territory between them. "Erevan," he said. "You left it in her room," Erevan said. He did not move from the doorway. "Volume 1. You put it there." "Yes." She read about Vythan. She knew to ask the archivist. "I know. The council saw her light this morning." Something moved through the old man's face. Something that looked, despite everything, despite all Erevan was holding against it, like relief. Like a man who has been carrying a long weight and has finally seen it set down. Good, Vython said. Good. It means the blood is awake. It means it can be offered. It means she is no longer protected by anonymity. Erevan's voice was very quiet. The quiet of something that has decided. It means every person in that chamber knows what she is, including whoever in this citadel has been reporting outward. Vython's eyes sharpened. What do you mean, reporting outward? The floor plans, the schematics from her old rooms at the Ember Throne. Someone here copied them before the documents were sent. Someone used that information to send people to attack her handmaiden. Erevan took one step into the room. Is that you? The silence that followed was long and had the quality of something being tested, weight applied carefully, to see what held. No, Vython said, quietly, that is not me. And then, with something that looked almost frightened for the first time, Erevan. There is someone else in this. Someone I did not account for. Then you have made the same mistake I made, Erevan said. You have been so focused on your plan that you didn't see what was moving alongside it. The old scholar looked at him, his student, the boy he had found broken after a war and helped reconstruct, now 150 years grown into someone formidable and, at this moment, immovable. I am sorry, Vython said. For Eren. I did not. Not tonight, Erevan said. The words were controlled and absolute and cost him something visible. That conversation will happen, but tonight you will tell me everything you know about the second player. Everything, and then you will present yourself to the council in the morning. A pause. And if I refuse? Erevan looked at him. One long, level, final look. You won't, he said. He was right. Vython sat down in the nearest chair and began to talk, and Erevan stood in the blue-green archive light and listened, and somewhere above them in the eastern tower Saoirse was reading border records again, with ancient light sleeping in her blood and her mother's letter folded against her heart, and the thornwood breathed beneath them all like something that had been holding its breath for a very long time and had finally, at last, begun to let it go. End of Chapter 6. Next, Chapter 7, The Marked and the Hidden.